Hello and welcome to another MovieBoozer.com virtual pubcast. I'm your host, Ken Ekman, and I'm joined today by Bill Arsenault.
Hey.
Bill Leon.
Hello.
And we may be joined by Hawk Ripjaw a little bit later. Today is sort of our Halloween episode. We're going to be talking about some Halloween favorites, Halloween movies that we like to watch around this season, and we're also going to cover a couple of new movies, which actually Bill Arsenault is our new movie critic today. I am. Well, I've been down with the cold for the last couple of days, so I haven't had a chance to see any new movies. So you're effectively the only one here who's managed to.
Oh man, where to begin? I mean, I suppose, you know, I mean, there were a couple other films that I saw, but there's really only two that like come to mind. We were just talking about this a second ago. And those two movies are two documentaries, although one is technically a concert film, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
That one is Michael Moore in Trumpland, and the other is Ava DuVernay's 13th, the currently on Netflix documentary. Which one would you guys like to start with?
So why don't we go ahead and get the politics out of the way?
They're both political.
Well, I mean the 2016 election politics.
They're both involving that too.
Okay, Michael Moore, get that the hell out of the way.
Okay, all right, let's get Michael Moore out of the way. Mr. Moore,
this sounds like
a line.
Like a fucking shit show.
What's that? What did Bill say?
This Trumpland sounds like a shit show.
Oh, it is.
So let me ask you this. How does this compare to the attempt he had to derail the Bush re-election campaign with Fahrenheit 9/11?
Slacker Uprising? That was the name of his documentary, sort of documentary in 2004 that he released for free on the internet, where he went around to different college campuses and did speeches about how Bush shouldn't be elected, how we should go with John Kerry, because John Kerry is going to get us out of the Iraq War, and, you know, he's going to support all these different liberal causes, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things he said in the trailer for Slacker Uprising was when he was confronted by protesters, like conservative protesters, he was like, "Who would Jesus bomb?" And everyone would be like, "Yeah, Jesus wouldn't bomb anyone."
Well, that's probably true.
So that's an example of one of his live retorts that he gives. Michael Moore in Trumpland, this was just shot like a couple weeks ago.
Right. And
he cryptically mentioned it on Twitter. He was like, I just got kicked out of a theater. And no one knew really why or what he was talking about exactly. And it turned out it was this concert film he was doing, which is basically a one-man show in front of a mostly conservative audience. And so it's not a very good movie. Well, it's not so much that the movie's bad. What's bad is his performance. He's not funny by himself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's better when... What's that?
Does he come off as condescending through like the whole thing?
No, he wasn't condescending at all, really.
Oh, okay.
He was... usually he does that. He reserves that for his movies. Like, he'll do that when he's at the editing bay, when he's got more of a command over the cinematic qualities. Here, It's just him with a live microphone.
Right.
And he's not very funny with a live microphone, doing improv.
So tell me, I've seen him do a sort of stand-up kind of material before, back in the 90s when he had his TV show. Back in the 90s when Michael Moore had a TV show. Sorry. Wow, you sound like you got a vocoder going there. But anyway, so yeah, when he had his show, in between segments, he would do this live thing where it was clear he recorded a good deal of it on stage, and it was kind of improvised humor to introduce segments. And I've also seen what was the film he did? The Big One.
The Big One, yeah. His book tour.
Right, his book tour. And what he was doing there was kind of the equivalent of like a stand-up comedy sort of thing, where he would go, and he would go before audiences and he would do, bits about corporations and stuff like that. And so
the difference between that and The Big One, for example,
right,
would be that The Big One wasn't entirely an hour-length version of his stand-up. We had breaks in between. He would actually do other stuff. He would go visit warehouses and labor protests, and he'd actually talk to CEOs and stuff like that. It wasn't just him on stage at great length. They would break up the tedium. And that's all that Michael Moore and Trumpland is just this tedious exercise in bad political humor.
And so he's doing it before.
Let me give you an example.
Go ahead.
Give you an example. They're in, I believe it's Wilmington, Ohio.
Okay.
And he claimed it was they set it up by saying, by interviewing several different citizens, like, hey, are you a Trump voter? And they're like, yes, I am, because I believe Trump is da-da-da-da, And so they're setting it up as if Michael Moore's going to be going against the odds.
Okay.
He's got this, thing where he's going to be against people who would be against his views.
Right.
But when they go into the concert, and he's like, who here is a liberal? Who here is a conservative? He actually gets good responses from everybody. So it's not like it's a completely deadpan conservative crowd. It's actually a combination.
Okay.
Some jokes he did were okay. Like, for example, he had a Muslim section, a section just for Muslim people, and he had a drone fly over them at one point to kind of, make sure the crowd was okay, like with the fact that they got Muslims. Like, don't worry, we have a drone flying over them. And then he had a Mexican crowd where he was building a wall. His set, like there was a wall being built between them and everyone else.
So he was separating them out.
Yeah, right, and that was kind of funny. I got the visual humor of that. But where he fell flat was he was making jokes like literally, he did a liberals do this, but conservatives do this. It was like the classic black guy does this, white guy does this kind of humor. And it was really annoying and grating.
Right.
Because he does that for extended periods of time. Like, he'll just go on like, I respect conservatives, because you conservatives are disciplined, you're this, you're that, But liberals, we're like, peace, man, and the crowd's like, oh, this is like the kind of humor that I can easily digest.
Now, you said that he was kicked out of the venue?
Yes, he actually was kicked out of the venue before the film, the concert film, so they had to rearrange and do it in Wilmington.
Oh,
I forget
see.
where the original one was supposed to be at, but yeah, he had an issue with that first one.
Oh, okay. So I thought you were I thought you were leading to something like he was actually on stage performing and he said something that got him kicked out or something. Now,
no, that would have been dramatic and great.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. He was basically, he played it very, very safe.
Okay. So that's interesting. Interesting in that to me it sounds like more desperation to be relevant.
Yes. Desperation. That's exactly what it is. Exhaustion is what it is, too.
Here's the thing. Michael Moore, I think, throughout the 1990s, he did a lot of very interesting stuff. And increasingly, as the 2000s wore on, I think his cards started to show a little bit more, and his inherent bias started to become more and more more and more visible in his work. In his earlier films, there was an even-handedness to some aspects of it. Even Bowling for Columbine, which is probably the first example of him straight up, making a major political statement, he did make some appeals to the other side of the aisle to an extent by pointing out things like, the movie was not an indictment of gun ownership in general. It pointed out that, in Canada, gun ownership is very common, and they don't have the same problem. And, why is that? Things like that. And it was an attempt to explore the purpose of that versus, say, Fahrenheit 9/11, which was just straight up, let's make a propaganda film.
Which I felt worked. I felt it worked as that.
It's an effective propaganda film, but it is propaganda, and a lot of the facts that he cites were questionable.
Maybe, yeah. There were some.
I mean, there's plenty of truth, but there's it's got a slant to it. It's just because you agree with the political stance doesn't necessarily mean that what is being done is for the best, is what I'll say. Yeah. The fact is, we do have to live with the other half of this country who disagree with us politically, and that's it's a fact of life. And as much as I'm definitely a liberal-minded person, and I can certainly become vicious when it comes to attacking the other side from time to time, I do try my best to keep an even-handedness to an extent, because if you do isolate the other side completely, that's when you start getting into civil war, basically. And that's
yeah, I agree with you. Well, what I was going to say was in regards to that, Michael Moore in Trumpland does do some valid attempts at relating to people.
Okay.
On the other side of the aisle, like he comes up with these moments where he empathizes with basically hard workers, the working class people, the people that are no longer the middle class.
Right.
And he says, it doesn't, I understand why you're voting for Trump. You don't like the system, and Hillary represents the continuation of that system. So, I completely understand that you've been made to feel this way, and when he makes when moments like that happen, that's when the movie's very good. But then he completely erases it a second later by going into a liberal conservative joke, just like a black guy white guy joke, and
right.
That's when he loses me. I'm like, oh, okay, he's going back to the easy crap.
Yeah, I mean, and it definitely. It sounds to me like the movie is underwhelming overall, that it's really just a concert film and it doesn't really do much else outside of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Well, then,
who would you propose, who would you like to see in his place? Like,
with
the same, themes and subject matter. Who would you like to see put on that concert?
Oh,
Russell Brand? I don't know.
Russell Brand.
If you're looking, if you're looking for a relevant political comic who has the ability to be incisive and also the ability to do humor that is impactful for both sides of the aisle, I think Lewis Black is a good choice for that.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one.
He's an equal opportunity hater. He went back when Bill Clinton was in office. He did a lot of Clinton humor. When Bush was in office, he did a lot of Bush humor. He's done plenty of Obama humor. I would say he tends to be a left-leaning comic, but I think he overall, in intention, he's very even-handed by that respect. Mm-hmm. So I see Bill Arsenault dropped off for a moment there, so we'll see if he comes back.
Oh boy,
it happens. We're at kind of a peak internet time right now when we're recording this, so maybe some technical difficulties. That being said, what I'll go ahead and do while waiting to see if we get joined by them again is I will, first of all, I'll ask you, Bill, what movies have you seen in preparation for Halloween?
Some goofy shit, some good shit.
Okay.
I watched. I had a whole like space themed night where we watched Jason X, Leprechaun in Space, and Twilight Zone the movie.
Oh God, Leprechaun in Space. That's a rough sit.
It was all right. Like we were drinking and riffing on it. So I mean, when it was boring, we would talk and not pay attention to the movie.
Which there's a lot of boring in that one. Jason X, I haven't seen, but I've heard people actually defend it.
There's no reason anybody should do that, but like, and really, like with such a ridiculous premise, you figure it'd be a more ridiculous film, but it's pretty milquetoast and standard.
Yeah,
if you've seen James Rolfe's video about Jason Kills or his video on Jason X, there's a kill where he like freezes some chick's head in liquid nitrogen and then slams it and it just turns into like mush. That's probably the best thing in the movie.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, that's too bad. But
Twilight Zone the movie, despite the fact that there is no actual space story in the movie, I thought that it made a perfect cap on that theme.
Yeah, I think you could argue that the gremlin may or may not have come from outer space.
Right, yeah, that. And then, well, like, the thing Dan Aykroyd turns into is kind of an alien, too, I guess.
Yeah, you can make that argument. But, yeah, I mean, so Twilight Zone, the movie, why don't we go ahead and chat about that, because that's a movie that, that's a movie I haven't seen for a while, but first of all, let me ask you, which is your favorite segment?
The George Miller 20,000 feet.
Yeah, Nightmare at 20,000 feet.
Yeah.
It's
just John Lithgow is just ridiculously intense in that.
And it was a wise choice to make that the end of the movie because it is really a balls to the wall, action heavy kind of segment that also deals very heavily with psyche, and Lithgow's performance is one of his best, I would say. And the design of the gremlin is pretty creative and intense, and it's I don't know if it was a Stan Winston design, but it looks like it could have been.
I don't remember. It's totally possible.
And of course, as everyone knows, unfortunately, the very first segment is plagued with controversy.
Well, before we touch, if we're going to touch on that, I would also just like to, because I've heard the one no one likes is Kick the Can, and you can't fault anybody for not liking Kick the Can.
Here's the thing, I kind of like Kick the Can.
When I watched it on a movie marathon and I'd been drinking, like I'm sitting there watching Kick the Can and I put together that Steven Spielberg, I'm like, this is fucking Hook. That's literally when they turn into children that went in my mind constantly. I was like, this is fucking Hook.
Well, first of all, Kick the Can is directly based on episode of Twilight Zone of the same name. And the concept. So it's not like he just invented it for the movie. It is a Twilight Zone episode that they expanded into a short film. But I think that they improve upon the Twilight Zone short, the Twilight Zone episode considerably in that there's a little bit more emotion to it. I like the nostalgia aspect, and that it builds up these old people are all they're all kind of they've lost their lease on life. They're basically ready to hang it up and die, and this kind of the youth thing kind of gives them a it's an uplifting segment. Now I will say this, I'm a little surprised they chose to make this a segment for Twilight Zone the movie. Because
and have Steven Spielberg direct it. I mean, I guess Steven Spielberg chose to direct that.
Oh
right?
yeah, and it's definitely a Spielbergian episode because it has. I mean, nostalgia is just oozing out of it.
The one thing that's pretty consistent and makes it, I think it elevates it above like a fluff piece is Scatman Crothers and how fucking charming he is.
Yes, even though it is certainly an example of the magical, the magical black character.
Oh, dude, I didn't even realize that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Which he also played in The fucking Shining.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely that. But I will say, Scatman Crothers is if there's anyone who could do that convincingly and also make it just damn charming, he did it in both of those films.
I'm back. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
We're talking about Twilight Zone, the movie, right now.
Have you ever watched that, Bill?
Yeah, I've watched most of it. Yeah,
most of it. I see. When I was a kid, right? I'm pretty sure it was those sci-fi New Year's marathons that got me into the show. But I remember like going through my dad's VHS tapes and finding the movie, and I was like, "There's a movie," and I put it on. The first two segments are not, scary or intense or anything. But those last two, especially if you're a kid, they'll fuck you up.
Anytime you have an anthology movie, you run the risk of of unevenness. It's the same thing with Four Rooms is, I think, a perfect example of that.
I recently saw Four Rooms, like this year or last year?
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh, the Tarantino segment. I love the Tarantino segment. The Tarantino segment was fucking stupid. I hated it. Tarantino's annoying as piss. Fucking, like, oh, boy. Give me Antonio Banderas and Robert Rodriguez all day.
The Misbehavers is by far the best of those four.
Did they misbehave?
Yes. Have you seen Four Rooms, Billy?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, Antonio Banderas, don't misbehave, and the one kid who's he's got the greased hair and it's ridiculous looking. I just love the cartoonish aspect of that. I would love to see Robert Rodriguez. Here's the thing, he's done so many children's oriented films, but he's never captured that kind of manic danger and atmosphere. I would love to see him do something. If he was going to do another kids movie, do something like that, but give it charm and give it deviousness and give it something a little darker like that. I mean, not necessarily a dead hooker in the bed. That kind of makes it a little less child friendly.
That was hilarious to me when Tim Roth vomited and he was like, "What the fuck is that?"
Yes, and then he threatens to put like the generic name for basically that
Vaseline.
Yeah, well, no, not Vaseline, but the scented balm stuff, Vapor Rub, basically. Okay. Like Vicks Vapor Rub on like the eyelids, so that if their eyes open in the night, then it would burn.
Oh yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, which is. And then, of course, the girl says, I just wiped it off. And he's like, I never thought of that. And, you think of stuff like that. It's, the misbehave. I know this has nothing to do with Twilight Zone, the movie, but we're talking about anthology movies, so it was worth pointing out. And also, another anthology movie that is surprisingly good. I say surprising because the show... Night Gallery was not a very good TV show, unfortunately.
That was on last night. That was on MeTV late last night. I had it on.
The Night Gallery movie, the premiere movie, is great. I like all three of the major segments in it. Particularly, the one I like the most, because I think it's the creepiest, is the opening one with Roddy McDowall as the kind of fey millionaire guy who kills his father in order to get the fortune. And the painting, like, you see the grave appear in the painting, and then you see, like, every time he sees the painting's changed, like the grave is suddenly becoming exhumed.
McDowell fucking rules.
Yes, and Ozzy Davis as Hortify, as Roddy would say, is great in that too. Yeah, so Twilight Zone the movie though, we didn't mention the Joe Dante segment yet.
I was going to talk about the first one, the John Landis one, because that's kind of what we were starting to talk about when we got into Kick the Can.
We'll hit on that one. Yeah, you know what? Let's go ahead and get the Landis one out of the way. Since
Vic Morrow is good in that segment. How the fuck does it even end? It's not that memorable of a segment.
Well, the problem is the segment doesn't end because they didn't finish shooting all of it.
No, it does. It doesn't. Right? Like he gets carried off by the train or some shit.
Right.
He's like trying to yell to his friends.
It ends with him being basically because the whole concept is he keeps being mistaken as a member of all these different oppressed groups. Like first they mistake him for being a black guy and things like that. In Vietnam, they mistake him for being like a Viet Cong.
They say "gook" a few times in it.
Well, that's the whole point. It's about racism, and then at the end, he's confused for being a Jew and put on a train and presumably taken away to a death camp. So that's a really fucked up ending. The thing is, they didn't have a chance to finish shooting it because Vic Morrow died while it was being shot.
The now infamous helicopter accident.
No, not just Vic Morrow, but Vic Morrow and 2 children during the Vietnam segment. And they were all beheaded, which is fucked up as it could be.
Do you think the studio still has that footage?
The footage exists, apparently. Yeah. And I don't know what... I doubt the studio has it. If anyone has the footage, I would say, here's the thing. At this point, now that all the legal aspects of it are gone, long since gone, I would say the best thing you could do is probably, as Werner Herzog said in Grizzly Man, you need to burn this.
Yeah.
Because no one needs to see a man and 2 children destroyed in such a brutal way. It's horrific, and it's unfortunate. And I'm not going to get into the blame game because the fact is we know nothing about this. You can only read up in retrospect as to what happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, also I got to say, anybody listening to this, don't fucking troll Max Landis about this on Twitter. He
has nothing to do with it. He's not John Landis, and don't troll anyone about it because all you're doing is being a horrible... I mean, you're being a horrible human being because you're bringing up an incident that is clearly traumatic for everyone involved.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you're right, though. I mean, trolling Max Landis about that is beyond tasteless.
Yeah, he had brought it up on his interview with Red Letter Media. He was just recently on Movie Fights by Screen Junkies, and he mentioned it again there.
Oh, because I'm sure they were a lot.
Yeah, which is really shitty.
It's a very medieval thing to blame the child who had nothing to do with it.
What was that? Did you hear that?
What's that?
Sounded like the Jaws music.
Oh, that might have been a motorcycle that just drove past. Yeah. I don't know if it was the Jaws music, but quite a spooky motorcycle, maybe. There's a few people around here who have those Honda motorcycles, the crotch rockets, and they have that loud noise.
Oh boy, yeah.
Anyway, so the Joe Dante segment.
I think it's one of the most interesting ones, just because it probably. So I really haven't seen the Vic Mar, like the original episode that the John Landis segment is based on. Mm-hmm. But as far as the other 3 that I have seen, I feel like the Joe Dante one takes the biggest departure from being a direct adaptation and just goes into fucking batshit crazy wacky land.
Well, it's the original version. Have you seen it?
Yes, It's a Good Life with Billy Mum, I don't know what his name is.
it's definitely it changes a lot, but the basic premise is there that the boy, like whatever the boy wishes happens.
Mm-hmm.
And like kind of the nightmarish quality of what would happen if that was actually the case, because let's be honest, little kids are kind of selfish bastards.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, Joe Dante takes it to its logical conclusion of it becoming a nightmare cartoon world. And like his sister's mouth is that's probably when I was a kid and I saw it for the first time, the scene where you see the sister like upstairs watching, like sitting in front of a TV set and her mouth is like gone. That freaked me shit out.
Yeah, that definitely freaked me out. The thing that always, when I even just think about Twilight Zone the movie, I think about those fucking puppets that they used in that segment.
Yes.
The rabbit out of the hat is so like, and it's so large and like towers over them. It's so great.
Yes. It's certainly, I would say, kind of a precursor to Gremlins in some ways. Because
this was post Gremlins, wasn't it?
No, Twilight Zone the movie came out in 1983. Gremlins came out.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that was like '85, the Twilight Zone movie. Okay.
Yeah, and here's the thing: it came out in '83, but it was shot. Twilight Zone the movie took a while to get to screen because of the whole Vic Morrow incident.
Right.
And in fact, there was at one point people were fearing that it wouldn't. Gremlins was the next thing he did right after this. It came out a year later.
Okay.
Yeah, and it genuinely though has that. It's kind of fascinating, Joe Dante's screen period at that time, because he did The Howling in '81. In '82, he directed a couple episodes of Police Squad.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and then Twilight Zone the movie came after that, and then Gremlins. But yeah, with Twilight Zone the movie though, the whole "It's a Good Life" segment, I think what's interesting about it is I find it interesting how the way they structured it as far as the 4 segments, because excuse me, because the very first segment is very much, I would say, a classical Twilight Zone twist kind of one, the timeout, which is the Vic Morrow one. Kick the Can is sort of the softer side of the Twilight Zone, which
it's whimsical. Yes,
the whimsical side, which of course I think it's fair to try to capture that. I think it was a mistake in this case to do it. I like the sketch, but I think putting it in the movie, or I mean, when you only have 4 segments to go with, Kick the Can is hardly one that I would want to represent. Here's the thing: if you're going to represent the whimsical side of the Twilight Zone, my favorite is the Christmas episode where the guy becomes Santa Claus, the drunk.
That's a really good one. There's the one with Ed Gwynn as a toy maker. That's a really good one. There's good ones. Like they did, you know. But it's interesting that they put it in the movie to try to represent that about the show. That it wasn't always just, you know, horror or sci-fi or, you know, this or that.
But the thing is, It's a Good Life and Nightmare at 20,000 Feet are both horror oriented.
Yes.
And I think that's a reflection of the fact that the film was made in the 80s, because Twilight Zone didn't deal with straight up horror very often. It mostly was science fiction and fantasy elements.
It would give you like if they had a good twist ending, I would give you like a chill, like, oh my god. But
there are a handful. I mean, of course, you have the classic one with the talkie Tina.
Yes, the one. What the fuck is it called? Where everyone's a pig face monster, but you don't find out till the end, and then the woman that they keep calling ugly is normal.
Yeah, that one is pretty freaky too, for sure. Although you could argue that's more science fiction.
Is in the Joe Dante "It's a Good Life" sketch? Isn't there a twist that the quote unquote family he's holding hostage isn't even like members of his family? They're just like people he kind of pulled into his world.
Yes.
That's not present in the original, right?
Right.
That's fucking freaky. Like,
yeah. So, and the idea being that the boy collects people to join.
Yeah.
Now, the last thing we need to talk about in talking about Twilight Zone, the movie, is the wraparound segment.
What's this? Dan Aykroyd and Albert Brooks. I could just watch them driving all day, probably.
Oh yeah, if Dan Aykroyd and Albert Brooks did a road movie together, even now I would watch it.
What if instead of John Candy, Albert Brooks co-starred in The Great Outdoors?
That could have been interesting. Actually, I can legitimately see that working. Although I have a soft spot for The Great Outdoors. Everything in that movie that has to do with John Candy and Dan Aykroyd is funny. The parts of the movie that sag is anything that has to do with the rest of their families.
I like that the Midnight Special opens the film, and then they're listening to it in the car. The way I remember, even as a kid, I remember the way Dan Aykroyd brings up the Twilight Zone in conversation is really like weird and offbeat. He's just like, "Hey, do you remember the Twilight Zone?" I'm like, "All right, Dan Aykroyd, what the fuck is this?"
Well, Dan Aykroyd is a man who lives within a Twilight Zone, so...
I do not believe that we will make alien contact, especially after 9/11. Sorry. Crystal Head vodka. Buy it.
Exactly. So, now that we've mentioned that, I'm going to go ahead and segue into another Halloween favorite of mine that... in fact, I even mentioned it in reference to Joe Dante. I just watched both of the Gremlins movies.
Right.
Now, I know what you're gonna say.
I'm not gonna make a big deal about it. It's just my personal tradition to watch Gremlins in December.
And of course, you can. The first one's set at Christmas, which is, of course, it's understandable that you would want to watch it as a Christmas film. But in my case,
every time I hear that story about Phoebe Cates' dad falling down the chimney, I'm just in the Christmas spirit, boy.
Ho ho ho! But I had not seen Gremlins in years, and even more so, I had almost no recollection of Gremlins 2. I know that at some point in my life I had seen it, but I couldn't say for sure if I saw the whole thing or if I only saw pieces, or if because there's images of it in my head. I just couldn't recall specifics.
I might prefer Gremlins 2, honestly, just because nobody. I don't think in the history of film has any... Well, no, that's not true. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is the only movie I can think of that, made a sequel that is just kind of it's fun, but it's also fuck you to the audience.
Well, it certainly has a rebellious aspect to it that is you can't help but admire. The main difference is Gremlins. The first Gremlins is a bona fide attempt to do a creature feature horror movie.
Yeah, the small town is ravaged.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes a little bit and piece from some old nostalgic films, and then brings in the rubber monsters of the Gremlins and makes them and they are funny characters, and there's a lot of humor in it. But Gremlins also is kind of a horrifying film. There's plenty of moments in it that are legitimately creepy.
Legitimately suspenseful as well. The scene where the Gremlins are kind of stalking the mom in the living room and in the Christmas tree and shit. That scene has a lot of good suspense in it. Absolutely.
And the best thing about me rewatching it all these years later after not having seen it is I forgot who lived and who died. So I legitimately I felt like I was watching it for the first time because I thought I had a vague memory of the mother actually dying. And
oh no, she survives.
Exactly. But since I was thinking that could have happened, it made the scene that much more suspenseful.
Oh, that scene with the mom is scored to Christmas music.
Right.
It shouldn't work at all, but it fucking does.
And the movie also gives you, as I said, some legitimate So there's a It's a Wonderful Life kind of aspect to the film in that the movie kind of has a Potter.
The old lady,
yeah, the mean old lady who's also they indicate she's a landlord as well.
Miss Gulch from Wizard of Oz. There's a few different characters you could compare it to.
I would say the reason why I'm going with It's a Wonderful Life is because of the Christmas theme, and to me, it almost feels like the way that her character ends up getting killed at the end. It ends up being, to me, the ultimate statement of this is the one thing of the one flaw about It's a Wonderful Life is that Potter never gets a comeuppance. The character just kind of disappears from the movie, and it's the one flaw in what I think is otherwise a brilliant movie. But that character did something horrible, and there needed to be some sort of a reprisal. Whether it was, I would say, an unintended consequence, as opposed to something, like I'm not saying George Bailey should have beat the shit out of an old man in a wheelchair or something.
Why not?
Yeah, I agree that it probably could have happened that way, but
that would be a totally different movie, like Jimmy Stewart goes to jail for assault.
Yeah, but it was not going to end that way. So what I instead think Joe Dante probably had the same feeling that I had when he was making Gremlins, and he said, so in It's a Wonderful Life, Potter gets away. So I'm not going to let the evil, scummy human character who takes advantage of everyone around them get away in my movie. So he fucking puts her into that assisted chair, shoots her out the window, and you see her splat on the sidewalk.
Oh, and the gremlins are cackling like little fucking demons as they do it. It's perfect.
I have to admit, I laughed like a bastard when I saw that.
It's the thing. Let's talk character design.
All right.
Or rather, creature design, because goddamn, like, there's a reason that fucking Gizmo and Gremlins were like all over the place in terms of like toys in the 80s.
Right.
They're great designs. They're instantly recognizable, and the Gremlins should not work as well as they do. Like, they have this reptilian skin, these yellow eyes. They should be fucking creepy, but they're fun, deranged cartoon characters.
Yeah, and what I think is fascinating, I love how at the climax of the first film is all the gremlins in town have gathered in the local movie theater to watch Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
That and the bar scene. Yeah, that and the bar scene are just like... maybe they brought a big tub of sugar to the set and were like, all the puppeteers, come eat this sugar.
Yeah.
Just raw.
Exactly. It is, well, of course, this was the 80s, so the more likely explanation is a mountain of cocaine. But either way, it was, how to explain it? It's such a satisfying climax, because really Gremlins are a reflection on kind of the darker side of humanity, and what people are like when they're partying and when they're drunk, and then Gremlins 2 comes out, and Gremlins 2 instead takes all of the manic craziness of those last two those last segments, the bar scene and the movie scene, and it says, let's make an entire movie out of that.
More or less. There's a bit of social satire there, I guess. Is the Clamp Corporation supposed to be Trump?
A lot of people have said that, and it makes sense. I mean, Clamp Trump.
The guy, the leader of the company, whatever his name is, Clamp. He seems more of a nice man than Donald Trump, because he ends up becoming a good guy. Or they never really portray Clamp as a bad guy in that, do they?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it would be different nowadays if they did another one.
Yeah.
But I would say I would call him. I wouldn't call him an antagonist, but I would call him kind of a bastard who's unaware of people around him and willing to sacrifice, people around him for his own betterment.
Mm-hmm.
He's definitely not the worst character in the story. That definitely would go to Robert Picardo's character, and Robert Picardo's character gets probably the worst, the worst reprisal you could wish on someone, and that's essentially being raped by a gremlin.
Ugh.
It happens at the end. The female gremlin basically kind of corners him, and he's helpless.
How can't he just punt that little motherfucker across the hallway? I could be wrong, but it's probably supposed to be consensual because he could overpower that thing.
You know what? I'm not even going to get into that because that opens up a whole bunch of that opens up some avenues that I want to explore. But
I fucking hate the people that meme the lady gremlin or transgender gremlin because it is because of a chemical thing, right? That happens.
I don't recall.
Isn't the lady gremlin like a result of all of them drinking the chemicals in the lab? Because there's like bat gremlin, spider gremlin. There's a really funny Key and Peele sketch about the brainstorming team behind Gremlins too. Have you ever seen it?
Yes. Yeah. It's definitely a interesting. I mean, the thought that went into it has to be pretty.
What the fuck is that?
What the? Yeah, what is that?
God knows what the fuck that is.
So anyway, so with Gremlins 2, I would say the thing that I like most about that film is the fact that it's just a complete surrender into absurdity. And, I mean, of course, we've talked about the Leonard Maltin scene before.
Yeah.
That's always an amazing aspect.
And Al Lewis. Al Lewis is like a Svengoolie type.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you get the horror boss, and
that's what's cool about it is like they decided like the setting is this building where they film TV shows. Like it's like just fucking free reign. We can make up whatever we want to put in this building.
Exactly. Yeah, and one thing that I have to say is probably my absolute highlight of the film is I love the brainy gremlin voiced
Tony
by
Randall.
Tony Curtis. Tony Randall.
Tony Curtis. Is it Tony Randall?
Tony Randall or Tony Curtis?
Is Tony Randall the fucking book guy?
I think it's
Tony Robbins.
Okay, well, I think you're right. I think it is Tony Randall. I don't know why I was thinking about Tony Curtis.
That's great. They did some promotional stuff with that character. That's like one of the best characters in the whole film. And then he does fucking New York, and oh god,
Yeah. But
he's got the fucking jacket slung over his shoulder. It's great.
I have to say that I find interesting though Tony Randall's performance as the voice, the accents that he's putting on, kind of the officious accent, almost reminds me of Hugh Laurie doing his comedy around that same time.
Oh,
and, yeah. So yeah, that's something that I definitely like to highlight there. Now, with that said, the question comes, as to which film is better, and I think it's hard to compare the two because one film is a legitimate attempt to do a creature feature horror film,
mm-hmm.
and the second is it's a completely different genre of film with the Gremlin characters.
Yeah,
and
I enjoy them both pretty equally for different reasons. I might give the second one the edge just because I've probably seen it more times and I like cartoony, quote-unquote, satirical shit. The fact that they were under Warner Brothers with both films, but really the second one, they got to open with the Looney Tunes,
mm-hmm.
and then the Bat Gremlin makes the fucking Batman logo in the wall.
Yes.
Those are both great little touches that they could not have done if it was not a Warner Brothers film.
And you have to respect, of course, the appearance of so many wonderful cameos in that movie. I have to say one of my favorite appearances is Christopher Lee as Dr. Catheter.
Oh yeah, he's great.
And then you have other appearances. Hulk Hogan's appearance is to this day just kind of baffling because the movie literally is put on hold for him to make an appearance.
Not only that, but a parent goes and complains because, like, basically they're just making fun of the first movie. Like, oh, my child watched this and it fucked them up. Which is, yeah, like, I remember when I was a kid and you would just talk about the movie Gremlins and people would be like, oh, that scared me. I'm like, really? It's fun.
Yeah. Now, here's a cameo that I wonder if you even noticed. John Astin.
Who is John Astin?
Of Gomez Addams on the original Addams Family TV series.
Who does he play?
He's the janitor in like this. His character.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, John Astin is the janitor.
He spills the water. He spills the water on him.
Yes, exactly. He's the guy. He's the guy who causes the gremlins to spawn, basically. Yeah, and I find the way it's done, they hide it very well that it's John Astin because they put an extra bit of he's got the hat, a lot of things hiding his most recognizable features, and I thought that was a nice little piece. Let's throw Gomez Addams into this movie, and it's kind of surprising because when you think about it. Gomez Addams, if you're going to cast him in the movie, wouldn't you want him to be the horror host? Yeah,
I would not. I don't know. Al Lewis was a good choice.
Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely not shooting down the guy who plays him. Actually, you're not. It's not Al Lewis, by the way.
Oh, he looks like Grandpa Munster, doesn't he, though?
Yeah, you've said Al Lewis a couple times. The actor's name is Robert Prosky. And,
the guy from Last Action Hero.
Right, exactly. And he was also in, like, Glengarry Glen Ross on Broadway, I think, and stuff like that.
Yeah, his costume in that movie is, like, intentionally supposed to look like Grandpa Munster, right?
Yes. Oh, okay. Absolutely. The makeup.
That's why I keep calling him Al Lewis.
Here's the thing. Al Lewis definitely. It seems like something that he probably would have been involved with. I mean, yeah. I don't know why. In fact, I don't know why they didn't choose him for it. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe what they did is they probably cast John Astin later. And they'd already cast this guy to do it, but he does a great job, so I'm not going to.
Yeah, he's good in it.
So with that said, I'll go ahead and it's now time that we talk about, or rather, Bill, this is your time because you have something you need to talk about.
Let's talk about Rocky Horror Picture Show, which before you just recently watched it. When had you seen it prior to that?
Sort of like Gremlins, so far into the past that I may as well have never seen it.
Okay, fair enough. And you were not in love with, like, the third act of the movie, right?
Not particularly. I found it kind of dragged a little bit, and
I guess that really depends on if you like those songs. I like those songs. I can't even really criticize that movie. I don't think I've seen a movie more than I've seen that one.
Fair enough. I'm not taking anything away from your enjoyment of the film.
Right. I'm not suggesting that you were. I can't really even when I try to, like, criticize something, I'm like, well, I think that's just how it is. I don't know. It's so offbeat that it doesn't, like, I wouldn't. It kind of doesn't adhere to, like, a normal story structure.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah.
And in that way,
the story is basically incoherent at best.
Right.
I honestly had to read the Wikipedia entry to follow what was happening a few times in the movie. I was like,
yeah.
the first example is the appearance of Eddie, because he appears on the motorcycle, and I'm like, wait a second, who is this? And I was trying to listen to the music, and I wasn't hearing anything.
That information is doled out in little tiny morsels throughout the rest of the film.
Yes, well, yeah.
And I mean, I had to watch it multiple times before I was actually like certain of what was going on in the story.
Right. Yeah. It really. I don't know.
So the Fox channel, 20th Century Fox, being all like, we own the rights to this, decided they were going to remake it, and that aired last Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And good fucking Lord, it was bad. Everybody knew it was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be bad. I watched it. It exceeded my expectations of badness, because holy fucking shit, this thing. It's like, obviously I think they want to compete with what NBC has been doing, which would be these like live, am I still on?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just making sure. The NBC has been doing these live musical stagings. They did Peter Pan. They did The Wiz. I think they did Grease. And they usually get pretty good ratings. This is not live. This is all pre-recorded. And okay, so like one thing I like about the first movie, or the original movie, is that the way the visuals are, like, I think they chose some great locations, they built some great sets, but the film, there's not really like any bright, vibrant colors. Everything's kind of washed out and faded and has this old feel to it. The new one is bright fucking colors, clean set, like everything looks too goddamn clean. This fucking thing, yo. The soundtrack is too clean. Like, there's the guy who directed the remake is named Kenny Ortega. I believe he's like the guy who did all the High School Musical movies, and that kind of shows, because it's like some fucking High School Musical shit. Like, it comes off as kind of insincere. Like, who the fuck did they make this for? I believe Kenny Ortega like told the cast to do it campy. This is like, that's always been a word that's associated with this movie, is campy. And it is, but would you call the acting like super campy in it?
Oh, absolutely.
Really? I don't. I think that they still come off as believable in it, right?
No.
Well, maybe that's just me. Again, like I'm so desensitized.
Barry Bostwick and Susan Sarandon are
they're supposed to be like from the 50s. I think that works.
Except that people from the 50s didn't actually talk like that. It's a trope of the performances you see in the movies. It's an intentionally campy portrayal of that. The movie is Rocky Horror. All of the performances in it are played up in a big way.
Maybe I just like the original too much.
I would say in the film there isn't a single performance I can say, to be honest, wasn't campy. Even the criminologist, which is probably one of the more reserved characters, it's it's and that's not to shoot it down. That's what they were clearly going for.
Yes, it doesn't work in the remake. I don't believe anyone, and I don't have fun watching them. Their line delivery is so like for example, the creation scene.
Okay.
How about Tim Curry's intensity during the creation scene, where he's just like yelling and giving orders and shit? In this, it's Laverne Cox doing her Prince impression. Throw open the switches on the sonic oscillator. And It's okay. Let me talk about Laverne Cox, who plays Frank in this. She is a transgendered actress who works on Orange is the New Black. I do not watch Orange is the New Black, but when they cast the role for the remake, I was thinking like, okay, that's an interesting, bold choice. I hope this is good. It was fucking terrible. It was just fucking awful. It made me want to see Prince in that role, because most of what she's doing is evoking Prince. And kind of, or if Prince tried to do a really terrible Tim Curry impression, that's what some of it comes off as. And it's so bawdy. It's so, like, I don't feel the sincerity. Like, I don't feel the love for the original material. I feel like this was a fucking cash grab. And it shows. It comes off as that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it clearly, I mean, there's no reason to remake it other than to capitalize on it. And
their excuse is that 2015 was the 30th anniversary.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But it's 2016.
But again, you're a fucking year late.
Yeah. What it means is some executive in 2015 said, well, we're at the 30th anniversary. Why don't we acquire the rights to do Rocky Horror? And we'll... Now, here's my question. Was this done... was this actually pre-recorded, or was this done live on stage?
Oh no, this is a shoot. This was a production. There are sets. There's editing to the camera. You know, like this was like a TV special.
See, that's the thing. I could see if they decide to do a live performance, or even if it was a pre-recorded thing where they recorded a live performance and then broadcast it after the fact. That I could buy into, and I might even be interested in, because there's a to me there's a more natural aspect to that. It gives the performers something to work against, that being the audience. And I can't say that I'm a fan of those live performances where the first time that anyone is seeing it, they're seeing it on TV, because that's something that it's kind of a lost art. In the 1950s, that was a big thing to do, a play live on stage, you know, and you had shows like Playhouse 90, for instance, but no one's done that for so long. And the idea of rehearsing up to the point and then doing it, and also that when they did it, those shows were not typically musicals.
Like I said, NBC kind of started this trend a year or two ago.
Right. Well, 3 or 4 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, whenever. Like, what was... Did they do the Sound of Music too? It doesn't matter. Nobody... I'm not a big fan of those things. The Peter Pan with Chris Walken, there's a lot of debate and rumor about whether or not Chris Walken was drunk. He fucking seems like it.
I think it's more the train wreck aspect of it, in that they had a quick rehearsal time. I'm sure Christopher Walken's not an actor who had... I'm sure this wasn't a project that he had all that much time that he could set aside for it.
He's the most entertaining thing in it. There's a part where he like forgets his line, and I swear to God, like he doesn't do this, but he wants to be like, line.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and I'm sure that there's someone feeding lines too.
Oh shit! Let me get this out of the way. So,
okay.
They decided to bother Tim Curry with this awful Rocky Horror remake. He quote-unquote plays the criminologist in this. But for those of you who don't know, Tim Curry suffered a stroke about 2 years back. It might have been longer. I'm not sure on the date.
It was a few more years back than that.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable to watch him in this. I love Tim Curry. I have the utmost respect for him. They needed to cast anyone else in this role, because he talks like he talks like a stroke victim. It never comes off as natural. It just feels uncomfortable. Like, why did they bother this old frail man? Let him fucking. This is just no. Oh, did it freeze?
Oh no.
Oh, there it goes. Like you just have to see some of his performance in it to get what I mean. It's just
I understand and I respect
you,
that they were wanting to bring him back, but the fact is, in the condition that he's in, it may not be the easiest thing for him to do.
no, and it just comes off as uncomfortable. Like
Mhm.
I assume the idea behind casting him is it's going to be fun. We'll have him back. Like, there's a lot of different people they could have asked to do this too. Like Barry Bostwick is fucking. He'll do any fucking Rocky Horror type reunion.
Well,
Meatloaf's usually down for it.
it kind of reminds me of Kirk Douglas appeared in a film with Michael Douglas, and it was like a family kind of comedy thing, post-stroke, though. And it's, while on one hand you can commend him for doing, because it's clearly a family affair. They were doing it, to they even wrote into the plot the whole stroke thing. So it makes sense. But it's also kind of sad because you see this actor who once had so much power and gravitas, who's been, he's not able to command as much as he used to. And it's really unfortunate. And it's you can't help but feel sad when watching it.
Yeah, this is very similar to that.
And that's not to take him down, because Kirk Douglas is still alive and he's still going strong, despite that stroke that happened in the mid-90s. And so it's just one of those things where it's fortunate that he's still going strong, but it's hard to not feel sad watching that, and then comparing it to things like Ben-Hur. Did I say Ben-Hur? Fuck, Spartacus. God damn it. Sword and Sandal epics, they're starting to blend together in my mind. Spartacus, though. Or Paths of Glory. Movies like that. I would say Paths of Glory is the sterling example of Kirk Douglas as an actor.
This thing makes me sad because it's only a matter of time before they get to Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah, and it's an inevitability that they're going
fucking CG that plant, and I will riot in the streets.
I have to say that after watching Little Shop of Horrors this week, and seeing how perfect they got the puppetry on it, and the way the lips quivered and moved with everything, I don't see a reason why they need CGI. If they just need to recreate that kind of a thing. It was so perfect. I'm sure it was a hell of a time shooting it, but the result is so great. It is one of the best creatures I've ever seen created for a film, because it manages to hit all of its marks on the dot. There isn't even a hint of artificiality in it, which is what makes it so great.
And Henson worked on that, right? Like, he was alive, and Frank Oz directed the film. So I mean, I'm sure the whole Henson family was working on that thing.
Yeah, the Henson family. That's a way to look into it, I suppose. Yeah,
there should be a Robot Chicken sketch about the Henson family instead of the Manson family.
Yeah. That would be interesting, especially now that the Fraggles are coming back to HBO.
Well, now, do you know what the deal with that is?
Well, it's good. They're remastering the shows in HD, and
yes, they are not making new episodes, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, it is. And here's the thing. The old episode... Now, here's the one thing that intrigues me, though. You know that the show was drastically different in different countries that it was presented in?
No, didn't know that.
Well,
I didn't have HBO growing up, so I haven't really ever seen that much of the show to begin with.
Gotcha. Okay, so in Fraggle Rock, there is a human character and his dog.
The dog's a puppet, I know that.
Right, exactly. And the human character is played by a different actor, depending on what country it's in, and has kind of a different setting.
Huh.
In one case, actually, you know what? I better pull this up just so I don't fuck it up. Give me a second here. Fraggle Rock. The wonders of editing. Okay, so in the international co-productions of Fraggle Rock, and actually you can look this up in Wikipedia, but this is kind of fascinating. The main version of the show has the inventor named Doc and his dog Sprocket. And then there's the version for British television in which that takes place in a lighthouse, and you have a lighthouse keeper. And his puppet, the dog Sprocket there. The German version takes place in a completely different actors. I guess the idea being, since it's the German version, they wanted a German actor, and in the British version, they wanted a British actor to play it, that sort of thing. There's a French version also, in which he's a baker, an inventor.
A baker.
And instead of the dog named Sprocket, he's named Croquet.
What?
Yeah.
Are they remastering all of this, or just
I don't know.
the US
That would be
version?
interesting. I actually would. I'd be interested to compare, to see the same episode of Fraggle Rock in the British version or the French version.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, I know that you're running low on time here, Bill.
Jesus Christ! Can you hear that? It doesn't matter. Continue.
But yeah, I know that you're running low on time. So, do you have any other things that you'd like to go over?
I want to ask you about the latter George Romero dead films, like Diary and Land.
Oh, okay. I've never seen
it?
the third one, Survival of the Dead. I am sort of holding off on it because there's so many people have told me one thing or another about that one that I'm kind of waiting until I just, until that hype dies down in my mind before I bother.
I've only seen the original trilogy of Night, Dawn, and Day.
You may be better off not watching them.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say I actually legitimately find things to enjoy in both Land and Diary of the Dead.
Land of the Dead is the one Rich Evans hates, right? He was like, no, that's the garbage one.
On Red Letter, yeah. Land of the Dead, here's the thing. There's plenty of people who hate on that movie, and I think there's plenty of reason to hate on it. But the movie has a few things I enjoy. Dennis Hopper is the main villain.
Oh, okay.
And he's...
Man, when did they shoot that? When did he pass?
The movie came out in, 2005, I think?
Didn't he pass in, 2002?
No.
Okay.
Anyway. He did die a few years after it, but one of my favorite lines in the movie, Dennis Hopper, zombies, man, they creep me out. The world building is interesting because it attempts to show how civilization would carry on in the wake of a zombie apocalypse, and so you have an entire city. The entire city of Pittsburgh is now basically a human city that is fortified and designed to fend off the zombie uprisings, and it kind of continues the theme set up in Day of the Dead, which in Day of the Dead you have the idea of some of the zombies are starting to learn things.
Right, which is one of the best elements of that film.
Exactly. And Land of the Dead continues that, where you have a zombie who not only starts to learn, but he is starting to pick up on ways to organize zombies and get them to move in, like a pack. And so it's like a zombie army that he leads. And it's, elements of that I like. Some of the performances are hit and miss. I could take or leave John Leguizamo's performance in the film. There's a few characters I like. Land of the Dead is a movie that I don't blame anyone for saying it's terrible, because some of the CG elements are not great. And it's definitely imperfect in a lot of ways. But it has, I think it's the world building more than anything that I enjoyed about it. Diary of the Dead. Now, this is where we get into deep controversy. I definitely don't blame people for hating it, because it is overall a god-awful movie.
Which one came first? Land?
Land was first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Diary of the Dead was George Romero making a found footage zombie movie.
Oh, boy.
And here's the thing. It's not just found footage. It's found footage where one of the people who survived it is editing it and narrating it. And so it's a found footage movie with narration. And the narration in this is actually, you might want to watch it just because it's laughably bad.
Oh, really?
The movie opens up with the girl in the movie saying, I edited music into this movie and into this film of things I actually experienced because I wanted to scare you.
What the fuck?
Oh, it's terrible. There's a few things in Diary of the Dead, though, that I still appreciate that kind of still capture the George Romero spirit. For one thing, you have an Amish zombie hunter sequence.
Okay, there you go.
Where you have this Amish guy who like shoves a homemade explosive into a zombie's chest and blows him up. That's a pretty badass sequence. There's a scene in a hospital where like a zombie gets shocked by a defibrillator and his eyes explode.
Okay.
And the ending sequence, which basically like it's like we ran out of budget for doing a zombie movie on the road, so the entire rest of this film is going to take place in a house. And there are some aspects to it that I enjoyed. And here's the thing: Diary of the Dead is. Don't go into it expecting a good movie or even a great movie. Go into it expecting unintentional hilarity, and I think you'll be impressed more by that.
Okay.
It's a film that would not have been advisable for Romero to have attempted. The one reason I haven't seen Survival of the Dead is because I've heard too many people say that they really want to see it. Or not really. Some people who really wanted to see it who ended up hating it, and I know some people who saw it who ended up like liking it a lot, and like, and so since I've heard such a mix of that, the hype was boiling over, and I was like, you know what? What I decided is I'm gonna wait until this movie just shows up on streaming, and I just happen to bumble into it.
Okay.
If I see it, I might watch it at some point. I just don't want the baggage that came with it. Like with Diary of the Dead, I actually went into Diary of the Dead having read reviews, and yeah, it's Diary of the Dead. It's fucking awful in a lot of ways. It's just got it happens to have a handful of sequences that are effective.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, with that said, did you have any other Halloween movies or anything else you wanted to talk about?
I would love to, but there's way too much noise going on, and I gotta go get ready for work.
That's alrighty. We can close this episode up for the week, and on Wednesday we can continue it to an extent because it'll be a day after Halloween, and what we'll be doing then is sort of wrapping up. Actually, it'll be 2 days after Halloween, but we'll be wrapping things up.
No, I was going to say, when's election day? That's the next week.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Oh yeah, our that episode is going to be our election wrap-up episode. So what I propose we do for that, maybe is each of us should come equipped with a political movie to talk about.
I'll talk about First Kid, the movie about the president's son.
Oh, Sinbad.
Michael Jeter is like his bodyguard, right? No, it's like it's like a look-alike type dude. It's not Michael Jeter.
Yeah,
it's like discount bargain bin Michael Jeter.
All right. Well, we will see you next week then.
All right, take it easy.
Bye-bye.